Alright, good morning everyone. We are here with break 472, another 26 AFL Footy Stars case break. Our team list for this one: Adelaide Crows, Beck Sommerfeld, Brisbane Lions, Peter Lowe, Carlton Blues, Lee Marschall, Collingwood Magpies, Scott McBryde, Essendon Bombers, Tremane Patterson, Fremantle Dockers, Scott McBryde, Geelong Cats, Scott McBryde, Gold Coast Suns, Darlene Steedman, GWS Giants, Darlene Steedman, Hawthorn Hawks, Scott McBryde, Melbourne Demons, Tremane Patterson, and North Melbourne Kangaroos, Peter Lowe, Port Adelaide Power, Scott McBryde, Richmond Tigers, Tremane Patterson, St Kilda Saints, Tremane Patterson, Sydney Swans, Beck Sommerfeld, West Coast Eagles, Kezza Zanoni, Western Bulldogs, Darlene Steedman. Alright. I feel like that list, I might have made a mistake somewhere. That list isn't quite right, guys. Forgive me, but we will fix it up at the end. It should be right. I'm just guessing myself. Yeah, we'll be right. Let's go. But yeah, if I do have the wrong name with a team, I apologise. We'll say hello to Tremane. Welcome to the breaks, mate. Good luck with your first break with us. Let's get these out. And why we get these out, no winner in our round 23 NRL tipping comp. Footy pick the score that we have in our Facebook group. So the gift card for round 24 is now up to $375. So if we have a lucky winner, they will get that. It's for Thursday's game this week. Make sure you go and find the post in the group. And you must be a customer. Alright, that's our 12 boxes for this one. Let's go with box number 1. Good morning, Lee. Luminous J. Sicily for the Hawks. Yeah, give me a moment. Oh, God. Where are we at? I need to get some numbers on these teams so I can get the teams laid out. Just give me 2 seconds, guys. Because I've got no spaces in my team list so I can crunch it down, I can't even number point them. I've got to do it manually. If anyone knows what I'm blabbering about. Alright, there we go. Hawthorn, number 10, easy, that we can do. In the die cuts, number 34 for Collingwood. Yes, that is the solution. Numbers. All I needed. I can do that. Alright, Luminous for the Swans, Tom McCartan. And West Coast Eagles, Harley Reid. Luminous, Tom Lynch for the Tigers. And our, what are we? I need my list back. I haven't been through it again for a little while. That's what I should have done this morning. When I realised my list wasn't exactly right, I made mistakes. Yeah, I was right in what I was going to call it though, the rewind. Chad Warner for the Swans. Luminous, Darcy Byrne-Jones for Port Adelaide. And rewind, Patrick Voss for Dockers. Luminous, Jack Vinnie for Demons. Oh yeah. Number 11. Footy Heads, Matthew Kennedy for the Bulldogs. Luminous, Hudson O'Keefe for Carlton. Mac Andrew. Who are we for? Suns. Number 8. Luminous, Ryan Marrick, West Coast Eagles. And Port Adelaide, 100 games, Kane Farrell. Adelaide. Luminous for Adelaide, Josh Rochelle. Footy Heads, Darcy Wilson for St Kilda. Luminous for Collingwood, Scott Pendlebury. Luke Davies for the Kangaroos. Luminous, Nick Watson for the Hawks. Alright, number 10. Boom, Brody Grundy for the Swans. Luminous for the Suns, Sam Collins. 100 games for the Suns, Jared Witts. Luminous for the Swans, James Rowbottom. Footy Heads, Max Holmes for Geelong. Luminous, Kyle Langford for the Bombers. Josh Dunkley for the Lions. Jack Sinclair, Luminous for St Kilda. Bulldogs, Riley Sanders. Luminous, Alex Neil Bullen for Adelaide Crows. Hawthorn Hawks, Jack Ginnivan. GWS, where are you? Ed Richards, Luminous for the Bulldogs. Freo, Josh Tracy. Is that in the right one? Yep, my bad. Luminous, Caleb Sarong for the Dockers. For the Bombers, 100 games, Archie Perkins. Luminous, Darcy Jones for the Giants. Footy Heads, Christian Salem for the Demons. Where are we? Luminous, Marcus Bontempelli for the Bulldogs. I'm shocking with some of the names. Harry O'Farrell for Carlton. Luminous, Steel Side Bottom for Collingwood. Chad Warner for the Swans. Luminous, George Wardlaw for the Kangaroos. Footy Heads, Josh Weddle for the Hawks. Luminous, Tom Atkins for the Cats. And Collingwood, milestone, 150 games, Brody Mihacek. Luminous Sam Walsh for Carlton. Footy Heads Harley Reid for West Coast Eagles. Luminous Aaron Cadman for the Giants. Footy Heads Seth Campbell for the Tigers. Luminous Nathan Broad for the Tigers. Carlton milestone 200 games, George Hewitt. Luminous Nick Dacos for Collingwood. Footy Heads Zach Williams for Carlton. We have a new AFL break 473. Riley Thilthorpe, Adelaide Crows. And Footy Heads Finn Callahan for the Giants. Luminous Luke Davies for the Kangaroos. Finn Callahan for the Giants. Luminous Shannon Neal for the Cats. And Mercury Jack Higgins for St Kilda, number 314. No. Luminous Ty Gallop for the Lions. Footy Heads Kyle Langford for Essendon. Luminous Tim Kelly for West Coast Eagles. Rewind Will Day for the Hawks. Mac Andrew, Luminous for the Suns. Yep. Footy Heads, Errol Golden for the Swans. 4 packets left in our first box. Luminous Brody Grundy for the Swans. Patrick Voss for the Dockers. What are they? The Adrenalines. Luminous Patrick Voss for the Dockers. Messiah Wanganeen Malera for St Kilda. I know I'm probably not close, but I felt like I was on that one. AFL, yes. We don't have any NRL breaks up at the moment. The good news is selectors teased just a little bit with sort of a roadmap, I guess. With a few releases to come, so that's exciting. Kane Farrell for Port Adelaide. Footy Heads Josh Worrell, Adelaide Crows. Hopefully we get to see one of their release videos for an upcoming release soon. And we'll all get some more information. Luminous Keziah Pickett for the Demons. And milestones for St Kilda, 150 games, Rowan Marschall. And that's box number 1, done and dusted. Let's go box number 2. Luminous Ed Richards for the Bulldogs. Excuse me. Milestones, 150 games for the Swans, Tom McCartan. Luminous Riley Thilthorpe for the Crows. Footy Heads Isaac Heaney for the Swans. Luminous Patrick Voss for the Dockers. Marcus Windhager for St Kilda. Luminous Aaron Cadman for the Giants. Footy Heads Harvey Langford for the Demons. Demons number 11, yep, sweet. Luminous Nathan Broad for the Tigers. Crows Josh Worrell. Octane die cuts. Luminous Nick Dacos for Collingwood. And Rewind Noah Anderson for the Suns. 978. Luminous Luke Davies for the Kangaroos. Footy Heads Seth Campbell for the Tigers. No. Luminous Shannon Neal for the Cats. Collingwood Magpies steel side bottom. Luminous Hudson O'Keefe for Carlton. And for the Giants, Aaron Cadman. Luminous Ryan Merrick for West Coast Eagles. Footy Heads Colby McKercher for the Kangaroos. Luminous Josh Rochelle for Adelaide. Rewind for the Magpies, Scott Pendlebury. Luminous Scott Pendlebury for Collingwood. Footy Heads Nick Dacos for Collingwood. Luminous Kane Farrell for Port Adelaide. And Adrenaline Jake Waterman for West Coast Eagles. Luminous Keziah Pickett for the Demons. For the Giants, Footy Heads, Aaron Cadman. Luminous Marcus Bontempelli for the Bulldogs. Boom, Kyle Langford for the Bombers. And I thought I missed one, number 435. So we missed the first boom in the first box, guys. But we'll make sure we get that fixed up. Luminous Alex Neil Bullen for Adelaide. Footy Heads Shy Bolton for the Dockers. Luminous Caleb Sarong for the Dockers. Colby McKercher for Kangaroos. Luminous Darcy Jones for the Giants. Hawks Josh Waddell in the Octane. 9-10. Tigers Tom Lynch in the Luminous. For the Kangaroos, milestone 200 games, Caleb Daniel. Luminous Brody Grundy for the Swans. For the Bulldogs, 150 games, Aaron Norton. Luminous Steel Side Bottom for Collingwood. Footy Heads Riley Thilthorpe for Adelaide. Luminous George Wardlaw for North Melbourne. Miles Bergman for Port Adelaide. Luminous Tom Atkins for the Cats. And Mercury for the Hawks. Kausha Deer, number 131. Luminous Sam Walsh for Carlton. Footy Heads William Drew for Port Adelaide. Luminous James Sicily for the Hawks. Milestones 100 games for the Hawks. Luminous Tom McCartan for Swans. Seth Campbell for the Tigers. Luminous Darcy Byrne-Jones for Port Adelaide. Rewind Cam Zerha for the Kangaroos. Luminous Jack Vinny for the Demons. For the Hawks, Footy Heads James Sicily. Luminous Nick Watson for the Hawks. And for Collingwood, milestone 250 games, Jack Crisp. Let's say Collingwood. Luminous Sam Collins for the Suns. Octane Demons, Caleb Windsor. Luminous James Rowbottom for the Swans. Footy Heads Marcus Bontempelli for the Bulldogs. Luminous Kyle Langford for the Bombers. Darcy Fogarty for the Crows. Luminous Jack Sinclair for St Kilda. Milestone 100 games, Tyson Stengel for the Cats. Where are we? 7. Luminous Ty Gallop for the Lions. For the Demons, Harvey Langford. 2 packets left for the box. Luminous Tim Kelly for Eagles. Footy Heads Levi Ashcroft for the Lions. Luminous Mac Andrew for the Suns. Octane for the Eagles. Harley Reid. Alright, box number 2 done and dusted. Let's just push them back a bit further. Can't really be seen in the video anyway. And we'll get into box number 3 with a bit more space. I was feeling a bit cramped with that base set sitting there. Those cards, I should say. Luminous Toby Green for the Giants. Oliver Dempsey for the Cats. Luminous Oliver Dempsey for the Cats. For the Tigers, 250 games. Nick Velasquez. We tried. Luminous for the Lions, Lockie Neal. Boom, Jacob Van Ruin for the Demons, number 424. Luminous Aaron Norton for the Bulldogs. Jesse Hogan, a rewind for the Giants. Luminous Sam Laylor for the Tigers. Nice little win by my Blues. And what's the finals? Is it top 10? Milestones for the Dockers, 100 games. Luminous St Kilda, Jack McRae. Footy Heads, Patrick Dangerfield for the Cats. Luminous for the Giants, Tom Green. Milestone, 150 games, Cam Arena for the Lions. Lions, Ryan Lester in the Luminous. Scott Pendlebury for Collingwood in the Adrenaline. Collingwood number 4. Oops. Luminous Samuel Banks for the Tigers. Footy Heads Isaac Keiko for the Bombers. So as most of you would be aware, we recently went out and put the word out for a whole heap of bulk in the 26 League Heroes, which we have received and listed a fair bit of it. Still yet to receive some, and still yet to list a heap of it. But over the weekend, there's also a nice big collection of all different stuff going back to the 70s and that. So make sure you got your wish list up to date. Jack Graham for West Coast Eagles. You never know what is coming up. For the Crows in the Octane, Jake Saligo. Luminous Josh Tracy for the Dockers. Footy Heads Jack Gunston for the Hawks. Luminous Luke McDonald for the Kangaroos. Adrenaline Sam Durham for the Bombers. Luminous Marcus Windhager for St Kilda. Footy Heads for Collingwood, Jordan De Goey. Luminous Max Gawn for the Demons. And Milestone for the Bulldogs, 150 games, Tim English. Luminous for the Giants, Finn Callahan. Adrenaline George Hewitt for Carlton. Luminous Sean Mena for the Cats. Footy Heads Took Miller for the Suns. Luminous Jace Burgoyne for Port Adelaide. A Rewind Nasiah Wanganeen Malera for St Kilda. Luminous for the Lions, Josh Dunkley. Adrenaline Ed Richards for the Bulldogs. Luminous Tom Brown for the Tigers. Octane for the Giants, Max Grzuski. Luminous Patrick Cripps for Carlton. Milestone 100 games for the Demons, Harrison Petty. Luminous Errol Golden for the Swans. For the Demons, Jack Vinny in the Adrenaline. Luminous Nick Martin for the Bombers. Octane for the Tigers, Seth Campbell. Yep. Luminous Elijah Hewitt for West Coast Eagles. Footy Heads Todd Marschall for Port Adelaide. Luminous Archie Perkins for the Bombers. Adrenaline Josh Rochelle for Adelaide. Luminous William Drew for Port Adelaide. Mercury Sam Laylaw, number 226 for the Tigers. We have a predictor there. I didn't quite catch which one it is. Let's find out. Bronlow predictor signature. Number 197 for Port Adelaide, Ollie Wines. Luminous Jordan Clark for the Dockers. Adrenaline Tom Brown for the Tigers. Luminous Paul Curtis for the Kangaroos. Footy Heads Levi Ashcroft for the Lions. Luminous Cooper Sharman for St Kilda. Octane for the Bombers, Zach Merritt. Luminous Christian Salem for the Demons. Footy Heads Caleb Sarong for the Dockers. Luminous Jordan Ndogoe for Collingwood. Footy Heads Isaac Heaney for the Swans. Luminous John Noble for the Suns. Adrenaline Zach Butters, Port Adelaide. Luminous Jordan Dawson for Adelaide. Rewind Xavier Lindsay for the Demons. Luminous Dan Houston for Collingwood. Footy Heads Jordan Dawson for the Crows. 3 packets left for box number 3. Luminous Marschall for the Hawks. And Milestones 200 games for the Eagles, Liam Duggan. Luminous Bailey Humphrey for the Suns. Footy Heads Keziah Pickett for the Demons. Luminous Sam Darcy for the Bulldogs. Footy Heads Harry Chazelle for Kangaroos. And that's box number 3 done and dusted. Get these tidied up and we'll get straight into box number 4. Luminous Jack Bowes for the Cats. Footy Heads Max Holmes for the Cats. Luminous Joel Freya for the Bulldogs. Milestones 200 games for the Demons, Christian Petraka. Luminous Jacob Waitering for Carlton. Caleb Windsor for the Demons. Taylor Walker for the Crows. Footy Heads Liam Baker for the Eagles. Excuse me. Jack Ginnivan for the Hawks. And Milestones 250 games for the Lions, Charlie Cameron. Luminous Hayden McLean for the Swans. Footy Heads Zach Williams for Carlton. Luminous Sam Durham for the Bombers. Tim Kelly, West Coast Eagles. Alex Pearce for the Dockers in the Luminous. Rewind for the Lions, Cam Rayner. Luminous Josh Dacos for Collingwood. Octane for the Blues, Brody Kemp. Oh, camera's a bit see how that goes. Luminous Hayden Young for the Dockers. And again for the Dockers in the Adrenaline, Josh Treacy. Luminous Will Day for the Hawks. Milestones 100 games for Port Adelaide, Asava. Luminous Ollie Wines for Port Adelaide. Footy Heads Matthew Kennedy for the Bulldogs. Luminous Ben King for the Suns. Boom, Liam Baker for West Coast Eagles, number 14. Luminous Isaac Keiko for the Bombers. Adrenaline Errol Golden for the Swans. Luminous Isaac Heaney for the Swans. Footy Heads Sam Taylor for the Giants. Luminous Xavier Lindsay for the Demons. Footy Heads James Rowbottom for the Swans. Luminous Bailey Smith for the Cats. Octane for the Suns, Joe Walter. I think it's Joe. I'm not sure how else to pronounce that one. Riley West in the Luminous for the Bulldogs. And for the Lions, Harris Andrews in the Adrenaline. Luminous Jake Saligo for the Crows. Milestones 100 games, Wayne Malera. Luminous Jack Scrimshaw for the Hawks. Footy Heads Jordan Dawson for the Crows. Luminous Finn O'Sullivan for the Kangaroos. Adrenaline Matt Rowell for the Suns. Luminous Braden Campbell for the Swans. Rewind Archie Roberts for the Bombers. Luminous Archie Roberts for the Bombers. Adrenaline Jesse Hogan for the Giants. Luminous Michael Frederick for the Dockers. Footy Heads Josh Waddell for the Hawks. Where are we? Number 10. Luminous Matthias Philippou for St Kilda. Milestones 150 games. Shy Bolton for who? Dockers. Excuse me. Luminous Jake Riccardi for the Giants. For the Lions in the Octane, Cam Rayner. Luminous Connor Rosie for Port Adelaide. Footy Heads Jake Bowie for the Demons. Luminous Harry Sheasel for North Melbourne. Adrenaline Jordan Dawson for the Crows. Luminous Harvey Langford for the Demons. Mercury Bobby Hill for Collingwood, number 49. Luminous Logan Morris for the Lions. Octane for the Bulldogs, Joel Frazier. Luminous Taj Houghton for the Tigers. Footy Heads Caleb Sarong for the Dockers. Luminous Harley Reid, West Coast Eagles. Rewind Aaron Norton for the Bulldogs. Luminous Isaac Quaynor for Collingwood. Footy Heads Connor Rosie, Port Adelaide. Luminous Ben Long for the Suns. Essendon Nick Martin. I thought there was an extra I there for a second. Luminous Mitch Georgiadis, Port Adelaide. Giardis. St Kilda milestone 150 games. Zach Jones. And last packet for box number 4. Luminous Harry McKay for Carlton. Footy Heads Tim Taranto for the Tigers. And Bronlow Predictor Patch. Number 157 is a wild card for the Lions. Let's tidy up them cards and we'll get stuck into box number 5. Luminous Jake Riccardi for the Giants. Carlton milestone 200 games, Jacob Waitering. Connor Rosie, Luminous for Port Adelaide. Octane for the Hawks, Josh Ward. Luminous Harry Sheasel for the Kangaroos. Footy Heads, Jason Horn-Francis for Port Adelaide. Luminous Harvey Langford for the Demons. Adrenaline Cam Zerha for the Kangaroos. Luminous Jack Bowes for the Cats. Footy Heads for the Lions, Cam Rayno. Joel Freyer for the Bulldogs. Mercury Ben Long for the Suns, number 98. Luminous Jacob Waitering for Carlton. Adrenaline Will Ashcroft for the Lions. Luminous Josh Dacos for Collingwood. Adrenaline Sam Walsh for Carlton. Luminous Hayden Young for the Dockers. Footy Heads Tim Kelly for the Eagles. Luminous Isaac Heaney for the Swans. Footy Heads Toby Green for the Giants. Luminous Xavier Lindsay for the Demons. Footy Heads, Patrick Cripps for Carlton. Luminous Bailey Smith for the Cats. Adrenaline Isaac Heaney for the Swans. Luminous Riley West for the Bulldogs. Octane for the Eagles, Matthew O's. Luminous Will Day for the Hawks. Octane for the Swans, Matt Roberts. Luminous Harry McKay for Carlton. Milestones, 150 games, Ben Ainsworth for the Suns. Luminous Jake Saligo for the Crows. And for Collingwood, Josh Dacos in the Footy Heads. Luminous Jack Scrimshaw for the Hawks. Adrenaline Mark Blycats for the Cats. Luminous Braden Campbell for the Swans. Footy Heads, Sam Collins for the Suns. Luminous for the Bombers, Archie Roberts. Rewind, Jacob Wietering for Carlton. Luminous Michael Frederick for the Dockers. St Kilda Mitch Owens in the Adrenaline. Luminous Ollie Wines for Port Adelaide. Footy Heads Marcus Bontempelli for the Bulldogs. Luminous Matthias Filippo for St Kilda. Footy Heads Nick Larkey for North Melbourne. Luminous Taylor Walker for the Crows. Footy Heads Patrick Voss for the Dockers. Luminous Jack Ginnivan for the Hawks. Jai Amos for the Dockers. Luminous Hayden McLean for the Swans. Milestones, 150 games for the Swans. And we have a Brownlow Predictor patch. Number 1. Who we got? Nice. Alright, congratulations to Darlene. For the Giants, we have Finn Callahan, number 1. Luminous Sam Durham for the Bombers. Footy Heads, Bradley Hill for St Kilda. Luminous Ben King for the Suns. 100 game milestones for Collingwood, Bobby Hill. Luminous Alex Pearce for the Dockers. A rewind for the Tigers, Sam Laylaw. Excuse me. Luminous Logan Morris for the Lions. Marcus Bontempelli, Adrenaline for the Bulldogs. Luminous Taj Houghton for the Tigers. Demons Trent Rivers. Luminous Harley Reid for the Eagles. Milestones, 250 games for St Kilda. Fifth last packet in our 5th box. Luminous Isaac Quaynor for Collingwood. Footy Heads Nathan Broad for the Tigers. Luminous Isaac Keiko for the Bombers. Boom, Jeremy Cameron for the Cats, number 307. Luminous Ben Long for the Suns. Rewind Josh Dunkley for the Lions. Luminous Mitch Georgiada, yep, for Port Adelaide. And Adelaide Crows, Jake Saligo in the Adrenaline. Last packet for box number 5. Luminous Finn O'Sullivan for the Kangaroos. Milestones, 100 games for the Bombers, Xavier Dersma. Alright, let's quickly tidy these up and get stuck into box number 6. Luminous Darcy Byrne-Jones for Port Adelaide. Adrenaline Ben King for the Suns. Luminous Sam Collins for the Suns. Mercury Tom Liberator for the Bulldogs, number 242. Luminous Jack Vinny for the Demons. Footy Heads Bailey Smith for the Cats. Luminous Ed Richards for the Bulldogs. Rewind Josh Dacos for Collingwood. Luminous Riley Thilthorpe for the Crows. Adrenaline George Hewitt for Carlton. Luminous Patrick Voss for the Dockers. Footy Heads Max King for St Kilda. Luminous James Rowbottom for the Swans. Adrenaline Jesse Hogan for the Giants. Luminous for the Giants, Aaron Cadman. Milestones, 150 games, Darcy Tucker for the Kangaroos. Luminous Hudson O'Keefe for Carlton. Footy Heads Ben King for the Suns. Luminous Ryan Merrick, West Coast Eagles. Milestones, 150 games, Callum Chi for the Lions. Luminous Josh Rochelle for the Crows. Adrenaline Braden Maynard for Collingwood. Luminous Kyle Langford for the Bombers. Rewind Tom McCartan for the Bulldogs. Sydney Swans. Yep. Luminous Scott Pendlebury for Collingwood. Octane for Power, Kane Farrell. Luminous Nick Watson for the Hawks. Footy Heads. Tom Papley for the Swans. Luminous Darcy Jones for the Giants. And Adrenaline Patrick Dangerfield for the Cats. Luminous Tom Lynch for the Tigers. No, one over. Rewind Caleb Sarong for Dockers. Luminous Steel Side Bottom for Collingwood. 200 game milestones for Collingwood. Luminous Keziah Pickett for the Demons. Tigers, Jaden Short for the Tigers. A luminous Jack Sinclair for St Kilda. Footy Heads Nick Larkey for Kangaroos. Luminous George Wardlaw for North Melbourne. Footy Heads Archie Roberts for the Bombers. A luminous Tom Atkins for Geelong. Harley Reid, West Coast Eagles. Luminous Sam Walsh for Carlton. And Octane for the Eagles, Elijah Hewitt. Luminous James Sicily for the Hawks. Milestones 200 games for the Swans, Daniel Rioli for the Suns. My bad. Luminous for the Swans, Tom McCartan. For the West Coast Eagles, Footy Heads, Jake Waterman. Luminous Nathan Broad for the Tigers. Footy Heads, Sam Laylaw for the Tigers. Luminous Alex Neil Bullen for the Crows. And boom, Alex Toru for St Kilda, number 112. Luminous Nick Dacos for Collingwood. And for the Cats in the Octane, Max Holmes. Luminous Luke Davies for North Melbourne. And Adrenaline Isaac Heaney for the Swans. Luminous Shannon Neal for the Cats. Footy Heads Sam Walsh for Carlton. Luminous Ty Gallop for the Lions. Milestones 100 games Ben McKay for the Bombers. Luminous Tim Kelly West Coast Eagles. And St Kilda Max King in the Adrenaline. 5 packets left for box number 6. The Luminous Mac Andrew for the Suns. Footy Heads Jai Newcomb for the Hawks. Luminous Caleb Sarong for the Dockers. Footy Heads Todd Marschall, Port Adelaide. Luminous Brody Grundy for the Swans. Octane for the Tigers, Jonty Fall. Luminous Kane Farrell for Port Adelaide. And Footy Heads Darcy Moore for Collingwood. Along with a Bronlow Predictor signature, number 109 for the Lions, Will Ashcroft. And last packet for the box. Luminous Marcus Bontempelli for the Bulldogs. And milestone 250 games, Toby Green for the Giants. And that's another box done and dusted. Alright, let's go. Box number 7. Luminous Tim Taranto for the Tigers. Footy Heads Jeremy Cameron for the Cats. Luminous Jake Stringer for the Giants. 150 games for Power, Sam Powell Pepper. Luminous Zach Williams for Carlton. Adrenaline Xavier Lindsay for the Demons. Luminous Bailey Fritsch for the Demons. Footy Heads Harley Reid for the Eagles. Luminous Brady Ho for Eagles. Rewind for the Bombers, Zach Merritt. Luminous Darcy Wilson for St Kilda. Footy Heads Toby Green for the Giants. Luminous Daniel Curtin for the Crows. For the Bombers, Kyle Langford in the Adrenaline. Luminous Tristan Sherry for North Melbourne. Octane Power Ollie Wines. Luminous Noah Anderson for the Suns. And milestone 100 games for the Cats, Max Holmes. Luminous Nate Caddy for the Bombers. And Adrenaline James Sicily for the Hawks. Luminous Nick Larkey for the Kangaroos. Boom for Carlton, Harry McKay. Number 300, flat. 300 up, hiding up there in the corner. Luminous Connor Iden for the Giants. And milestone 250 games for the Bulldogs, Martin Bontempelli. Luminous Riley Sanders for the Bulldogs. Footy Heads Toby Nankovas for the Tigers. Luminous Matthew Owies, West Coast Eagles. And for the Tigers, Sam Laylaw in the Adrenaline. Luminous Seth Campbell for the Tigers. And Adrenaline Ben King for the Suns. Luminous Stephen Coney Glow for the Giants. Octane for the Magpies, Isaac Quaynor. Luminous Max Holmes for the Cats. Footy Heads Nasiah Wanganeen Malera for St Kilda. Luminous Lucas Camperell for Carlton. Charlie Cameron in the Mercury for the Lions, number 153. Luminous Jake Waterman for West Coast Eagles. Adrenaline Toby Green for the Giants. Luminous Nasiah Wanganeen Malera for St Kilda. Milestone 100 games for the Dockers, Luke Jackson. Luminous Ben Keys for the Crows. Footy Heads Took Miller for the Suns. Luminous Colby McKercher for the Kangaroos. Bobby Hill for Collingwood in the Adrenaline. Luminous Tim English for the Bulldogs. Milestones 200 games, Jarman Impey for the Hawks. Luminous Darcy Moore for Collingwood. Footy Heads Luke Parker for the Kangaroos. Luminous Shy Bolton for the Dockers. A rewind Matthew Kennedy for the Bulldogs. Luminous Levi Ashcroft for the Lions. Octane for Freo Caleb Sarong. And we have a Rising Star Predictor patch. Number 217 The West Coast Eagles. Luminous Matthew Kennedy for the Bulldogs. Footy Heads, Braden Maynard for Collingwood. Luminous Jeremy Cameron for the Cats. Port Adelaide, Horn Francis in the Adrenaline. Jason Horn Francis. Luminous Nick Blakey for the Swans. Luminous Jermaine Impey for the Hawks. Octane for the Blues, Sam Walsh. Luminous Zach Butters for Port Adelaide. Milestone 100 games, Tom Sparrow for the Demons. 5 packets left to go. Luminous Took Miller for the Suns. Rewind Jake Saligo for Crows. Yep. Luminous Andrew McGrath for the Bombers. Footy Heads Sam Durham for the Bombers. Luminous Chad Warner for the Swans. Footy Heads Lockie Neal for the Lions. And last packet. Oh no, 2 packets. One's hiding. Luminous Jasper Fletcher for the Lions. Ruben Ginby, West Coast Eagles. Right, last packet for the box. Jake Lever, Melbourne Demons in the Luminous. And Carlton Footy Heads, Ollie Hollins. Alright, I'm going to quickly duck off to the toilet, guys. I will be back in just a sec. And we are back. Sorry about that. Alright, well that was box number 7, so let's get them cards out of the way and we'll get straight into box number 8. Get stuck in, get this second half done and dusted. Luminous Levi Ashcroft for the Lions. Footy Heads Patrick Dangerfield for the Cats. Luminous Matthew Kennedy for the Bulldogs. Rewind Zach Guthrie for the Cats. Luminous Jeremy Cameron for the Cats. Adrenaline Isaac Keiko for Bombers. Luminous Tim Taranto for the Tigers. Footy Heads Tim Kelly for the Eagles. Luminous Jake Stringer for the Giants. Milestone 150 games for the Cats, Jack Henry. Luminous Zach Williams for Carlton. Adrenaline Luke McDonald for the Kangaroos. Noah Anderson for the Suns. Noah 7-8. Mercury Sam Taylor for the Giants, number 231. Luminous Nate Caddy for the Bombers. Footy Heads Kyle Langford for the Bombers. Luminous Nick Larkey for the Kangaroos. For the Bulldogs, Aaron Norton in the Adrenaline. Luminous Connor Iden for the Giants. Footy Heads Darcy Wilson for St Kilda. Luminous Riley Sanders for the Bulldogs. Milestones, 200 games, Jack Sinclair for St Kilda. Luminous Matthew Owies for West Coast Eagles. Octane for the Magpies, Neo Long. Luminous Nick Blakey for the Swans. Footy Heads, Matt Roll for the Suns. Luminous Jarman Impey for the Hawks. Boom! Scott Pendlebury for Collingwood. Number 82. Luminous Zach Butters for Port Adelaide. Footy Heads, Jordan De Goey for Collingwood. Luminous Took Miller for the Suns. Adelaide Crows, Isaac Rankin. Luminous Seth Campbell for the Tigers. Essendon Bombers, Sam Durham in the Octane. Luminous Max Holmes for the Cats. And a Coleman Predictor. Number 170 for the Power. Footy Heads, Isaac Rankin for the Crows. Luminous Stephen Coniglow for the Giants. Adrenaline Adam Sard for Carlton. Luminous Lucas Camparelli for Carlton. Rewind Zach Butters for Port Adelaide. Luminous and Jake Lever for the Demons. Footy Heads, Jack Gunston for the Hawks. Open how it's supposed to. Luminous and Jake Waterman for West Coast. Milestone 200 games, Jason Johannesson for the Bulldogs. Luminous Nasiah Wanganeen Malera for St Kilda. Adrenaline Zach Bailey for the Lions. Luminous Ben Keys for the Crows. Footy Heads Jake Lever for the Demons. Luminous Colby McKercher for the Kangaroos. And Octane for the Swans, Isaac Heaney. Luminous Darcy Moore for Collingwood. Jai Newcomb for the Hawks. Shy Bolton for the Dockers. 100 games milestone for the Eagles, Oscar Allen. Luminous and Bailey Fritsch for the Demons. Footy Heads Cooper Lord for Carlton. Luminous Brady Ho West Coast Eagles. Octane for the Saints, Mateus Filippo. Luminous Darcy Wilson for St Kilda. Footy Heads Finn O'Sullivan for the Kangaroos. Luminous Daniel Curtin for the Crows. Giants in the Adrenaline, Stephen Coniglo. We've got 5 packets left for the box. Luminous Tristan Sherry for the Kangaroos. And Rewind Taylor Walker for the Crows. Luminous Andrew McGrath for the Bombers. Footy Heads Will Ashcroft for the Lions. Luminous Chad Warner for the Swans. Milestones 100 games, James Jordan for the Swans. Luminous for the Lions, Jasper Fletcher. Adrenaline for Tigers, Jaden Short. And last packet for the box. Luminous Tim English for the Bulldogs. Milestones 150 games for the Dockers, Andrew Brayshaw. Alright, box 8 done and dusted. Luminous Massimo D'Ambrosio for the Hawks. Milestones 100 games. Tom De Koning for Carlton. Luminous Allaire for Port Adelaide. Footy Heads Jai Amos for the Dockers. Mitch Owens, Luminous for St Kilda. Rewind, Liam Duggan for West Coast Eagles. Luminous Patrick Dangerfield for the Cats. Octane for the Kangaroos, Nick Larkey. Luminous Toby Nankervis for the Tigers. Footy Heads Jesse Hogan for the Giants. Luminous Isaac Rankin for the Crows. Milestone 150 games. Nathan Broad for the Tigers. Luminous George Hewitt for Carlton. Footy Heads Christian Salem for the Demons. Luminous Jack Gunston for the Hawks. Adrenaline Connor Rosie for the Power. Luminous Zach Merritt for the Bombers. 100 games milestone for the Crows, Isaac Rankin. Luminous Max Hall for Saints. Footy Heads Daniel Rioli for the Suns. Luminous Kai Lohman for the Lions. Octane for Freo, Luke Jackson. Luminous Tom McCarthy for West Coast Eagles. Adrenaline Keziah Pickett for the Demons. Luminous Daniel Rioli for the Suns. Milestone for the Demons, Charlie Spargo. Luminous Luke Parker for the Kangaroos. Footy Heads Nick Blakey for the Swans. Luminous Charlie Cameron for the Lions. West Coast Eagles in the Adrenaline, Liam Duggan. Luminous Ashton Moyer for Carlton. Octane for the Giants, Finn Callahan. Luminous Kalsha D for the Hawks. Footy Heads Josh Dacos for Collingwood. Luminous Caleb Windsor for the Demons. Milestones for Power, 200 games, Darcy Byrne-Jones. Miles Bergman, Luminous for the Power. Braden Maynard for Collingwood. Luminous for the Saints, Mason Wood. Rewind for the Suns, Mac Andrew. Luminous Zach Guthrie for the Cats. Andrew Brayshaw for the Dockers. Luminous Jacob Hopper for the Tigers. Footy Heads Mitch for Power. Luminous Harry Perryman for Collingwood. And boom for the Suns, Mac Andrew, number 299. Luminous Murphy Reed for the Dockers. Footy Heads Mick Watson for Hawks. Luminous Josh Worrell for the Crows. And Premiership Predictor, number 51 for the Magpies. Milestones, 100 games, Connor Nash for the Hawks. Luminous Matt Roll for the Suns. Footy Heads Riley West for the Bulldogs. Luminous Mason Redman for the Bombers. Adrenaline Patrick Dangerfield for the Cats. Luminous Ned Long for Collingwood. Octane for the Demons, Jake Lever. Luminous Luke Jackson for Freo. Footy Heads Alex Neal for the Crows. Luminous Jake Bowie for the Demons. Mercury for the Demons, Harvey Langford. Number 53. Luminous Cam Rayner for the Lions. Footy Heads for the Lions, Cam Rayner again. Luminous Cooper Lord for Carlton. And for the Saints, Max King in the Adrenaline. We've got 4 packets left in the box. Lockie Ash for the Giants. Bailey Humphrey in the Adrenaline for Suns. Luminous Tom Libertor for the Bulldogs. Footy Heads Tristan Sherry for Kangaroos. Luminous Liam Baker for the Eagles. Rewind Luke McDonald for the Kangaroos. And last packet for the box. Luminous Callum Mills for the Swans. And Adrenaline for the Swans, Brody Grundy. Alright, another box done and dusted. Let's get these out of our way. And straight into the next one. Luminous Cooper Sharman for the Saints. For the Bombers in the Adrenaline, Nate Caddy. Luminous Christian Salem for the Demons. Footy Heads, Dion Prestia for the Tigers. Luminous Toby Green for the Giants. Milestones 200 games, Daniel Rioli for the Suns. Luminous Oliver Dempsey for the Cats. Footy Heads, Patrick Cripps for Carlton. Luminous Lockie Neal for the Lions. And for the Hawks, in the Adrenaline, Jai Newcomb. Luminous Aaron Norton for the Bulldogs. Milestones 100 games, Errol Goulden for the Swans. Luminous Sam Laylaw for the Tigers. Footy Heads, Max Gawn for the Demons. Jack McRae for the Saints. Adrenaline, Connor Rosie for Power. Luminous Tom Green for the Giants. Footy Heads, Joel Freya for the Bulldogs. Luminous Ryan Lester for the Lions. Rewind for Saints. Oh, Bradley Hill. We're getting in now. We've been going for 2.5 hours. Only got about 2.5 boxes left to go. Samuel Banks for the Tigers. Adrenaline, Luke McDonald for the Kangaroos. Luminous and Jack Graham for the Eagles. Milestones 150 games for the Crows, Jordan Dawson. Luminous Jordan DeGoey for Collingwood. Footy Heads for the Crows, Josh Worrell. Luminous Nick Martin for the Bombers. Footy Heads, Mateus for the Saints. Jace Burgoyne for the Power. Adrenaline, Xavier Lindsay for the Demons. Josh Tracy for the Dockers. Octane for the Crows, Darcy Fogarty. Luminous Luke McDonald for the Kangaroos. And Mercury Jagger Smith for Carlton, number 306. Luminous Marcus Windhager for St Kilda. 40 heads Isaac Keiko for the Bombers. Luminous Max Gawn for the Demons. Milestones 150 games Rowan Marschall for the Saints. Luminous Finn Callahan for the Giants. I don't remember getting one of these in the last one. What have we got? I'm not sure what this is. Can't find it on my list. I'm lost and confused, guys. Bear with me for a second. There's no ratio on the back of it. No ratio on the back of any. Rightio. As I said, not sure what it is. Obviously one of the parallels. Marcus Bontempelli for the Bulldogs. Number 51 out of 80. If you know what this one is, let me know. I don't remember hitting one in the last case. Adrenaline, Josh Rochelle for the Crows. Luminous, Errol Golden for the Swans. Milestones, 100 games, Harrison Petty for the Demons. Luminous, Sean Manor for the Cats. Octane for the Hawks, Connor McDonald. Luminous, Josh Dunkley for the Lions. Footy heads, Ruben Gimby for the Eagles. Luminous, Sam Darcy for the Bulldogs. Rewind, Stephen Coniglio for the Giants. Luminous Tom Brown for the Tigers. Will Ashcroft in the Adrenaline for the Lions. Luminous Patrick Cripps for Carlton. Octane for the Lions, Ty Gallop. Luminous Elijah Hewitt for the Eagles. Footy Heads, Oliver Dempsey for the Cats. Luminous Archie Perkins for the Bombers. Milestones 100 games, Bobby Hill for Collingwood. Luminous William Drew for Power. Ed Richards Acetate for Adrenaline for the Bulldogs. Luminous for Freo, Jordan Clark. And for the Giants, Footy Heads, Tom Green. What have we got? Our 6th last packet for the box. Luminous Paul Curtis for Kangaroos. Rewind Jack Gunston for the Hawks. Luminous John Noble for the Suns. Octane for the Suns, Ben King. Luminous Jordan Dawson for the Crows. Freo Patrick Voss in the Adrenaline. And Dan Houston for Collingwood in the Luminous. Footy Heads, Logan Morris for the Lions. Luminous Marschall for the Hawks. And boom, Jordan Dawson for the Crows, number 431. Luminous Bailey Humphrey for the Suns. Footy Heads, Hayden Young for the Dockers. Alright, let's just move the pile out of the way. Box number 11. Luminous Miles Bergman for Port Adelaide. And Adrenaline Caleb Sarong for Freo. Luminous Luke Parker for the Kangaroos. Boom for Power, Ollie Lord. Number 106. Luminous Ned Long for Collingwood. Footy Heads, Jason Horn Francis for Power. Luminous for Freo, Luke Jackson. Essendon, Nate Caddy in the Adrenaline. Luminous Jake Bowie for the Demons. Milestones, 150 games, Liam Baker for West Coast. Luminous Cam Rayner for the Lions. Footy Heads Will Day for the Hawks. Luminous Cooper Lord for Carlton. Rewind for the Cats, Max Holmes. Luminous Tom McCarthy for the Eagles. Jeremy Cameron for the Cats. Luminous Massimo D'Ambrosio, for the Hawks, him. Footy Heads, Chad Warner for the Swans. Luminous Alaire for Port Adelaide. For the Suns in the Adrenaline, Noah Anderson. George Hewitt for Carlton. Footy Heads, Sam DeConing for the Cats. Luminous Jack Gunston for the Hawks. And Mercury Isaac Heaney for the Swans. Number 322. Luminous Zach Merritt for the Bombers. And Adrenaline Nick Watson for the Hawks. Luminous Max Hall for the Saints. Footy Heads, Darcy Parish for the Bombers. Luminous Daniel Rioli for the Suns. And Footy Heads, Jack Graham for the Eagles. Luminous Kai Lohman Milestones 100 games for the Giants, Tom Green. Luminous Liam Baker for West Coast. Octane for the Tigers, Luke Traynor. Luminous Callum Mills for the Swans. Adrenaline Jacob Weitering for Carlton. Luminous for Freo, Murphy Reed. And for the Crows, milestone 250 games, Warrie Laird. Luminous Kausha there for the Hawks. Footy Heads, Mac Andrew for the Suns. Luminous Mason Wood for St Kilda. Milestones 200 games, Camden McIntosh for the Tigers. Luminous Zach Guthrie for the Cats. Footy Heads Patrick Voss for Freo. Luminous Jacob Hopper for the Tigers. Adrenaline James Rowbottom for the Swans. Josh Worrell for the Crows. Rewind Jason Horn Francis for Port Adelaide. Luminous Lockie Ash for the Giants. Footy Heads Mitch Owens for the Saints. Luminous Matt Rowell for the Suns. Footy Heads Josh Rochelle for the Crows. Luminous Mason Redman for the Bombers. Octane for the Bombers, Archie Roberts. Luminous Mitch Owens for St Kilda. Footy Heads Keziah Pickett for the Demons. Luminous Patrick Dangerfield for the Cats. Octane for the Bulldogs, Ed Richards. Luminous Toby Nenkovas for the Tigers. Kai Lohman Adrenaline for the Lions. Luminous Isaac Rankin for the Crows. And 100 game milestones, Joel Hamling for Swans. We got 5th last packet in box number 11. 1 box to go. Luminous Tom Liberatore for the Bulldogs. Milestones, 150 games for the Lions. Luminous Harry Perryman for Collingwood. Footy Heads, Harry McKay for Carlton. Luminous Caleb Windsor for the Demons. And Cody Waitman for the Bulldogs in the Adrenaline. Luminous Charlie Cameron for the Lions. Rewind Liam Baker for West Coast Eagles. Last packet for the box. Luminous Ashton Moyer for Carlton. Octane for the Giants, Toby McMullen. Alright, another box down, 1 to go. Let's get her done. Luminous Archie Perkins for the Bombers. Footy Heads Bradley Hill for St Kilda. Luminous Jordan De Goey for Collingwood. Octane for the Cats, Connor O'Sullivan. Luminous William Drew for Port Adelaide. Swans Riley Bice in the Octane. Luminous Jordan Clark for Freo. Patrick Cripps for Carlton in the Adrenaline. Luminous Paul Curtis for the Kangaroos. Footy Heads Sam Collins for the Suns. Luminous John Noble for the Suns. Mercury Sam Powell Pepper for Port Adelaide, 165. Luminous Cooper Sharman for Saints. A rewind for the Tigers, Taj Houghton. Luminous Christian Salem for the Demons. Adrenaline Sam Darcy for the Bulldogs. Luminous Toby Green for the Giants. Footy Heads Scott Pendlebury for Collingwood. Luminous Jack McRae for St Kilda. Adrenaline Harry Sheasel for North Melbourne. Luminous Jordan Dawson for the Crows. Footy Heads Finn Callahan for the Giants. Luminous Tom Green for the Giants. Footy Heads Harry Sheasel for Kangaroos. Luminous Ryan Lester for the Lions. Milestones 100 games Connor Iden for the Giants. Luminous Samuel Banks for the Tigers. Footy Heads Sam Darcy for the Bulldogs. Luminous Jack Graham for West Coast Eagles. Adrenaline Darcy Byrne Jones for Port Adelaide. Luminous Dan Houston for Collingwood. Tigers Adrenaline Tim Taranto. Luminous Finn Callahan for the Giants. Footy Heads Nathan Broad for the Tigers. Luminous Sean Manor for the Cats. Octane for the Saints Darcy Wilson. Alright, about half a box left to go for this break. Don't forget to grab your spots in the next one, now listed on the website. Josh Dunkley for the Lions. Adrenaline Kausha Deer for the Hawks. Luminous Sam Darcy for the Bulldogs. Footy Heads Jai Caldwell for the Bombers. Marschall for the Hawks. Milestones 150 games Jacob Hopper for the Tigers. Luminous Tom Brown for the Tigers. Boom. Caleb Sarong. Number 390 for the Dockers. We have a signature predictor. A Brownlow signature wild card number 77 for the Crows. Luminous Patrick Cripps for Carlton. Milestones 100 games, Jordan Ridley for the Bombers. Luminous Elijah Hewitt for West Coast. Adrenaline Bailey Smith for the Cats. Luminous Oliver Dempsey for the Cats. Milestones 150 games, Tim Kelly for the Eagles. Luminous Lockie Neal for the Lions. Milestones 200 games, Took Miller for the Suns. Bailey Humphrey for the Suns. Footy Heads Luke Jackson for the Dockers. Aaron Norton for the Bulldogs. Harvey Langford for the Demons in Rewind. Luminous Sam Laylaw for the Tigers. Footy Heads Kai Lohman for the Lions. Luminous Errol Golden for the Swans. Footy Heads Zach Butters, Port Adelaide. Luminous Nick Martin for the Bombers. Octane for Kangaroos, Colby McKercher. We got fifth last packet of the break. Look out, here we go. Luminous Jace Burgoyne, Port Adelaide. Jack Sinclair, Adrenaline for St Kilda. Luminous Max Gawn for Demons. Milestones 200 games, Adam Sard for Carlton. Really like those milestone cards. I do. And I like the way they've got a different colour, like a bronze, a silver, a copper, for how many games they've got. Freo, Josh Tracy, Luminous for the Dockers. Rewind, Jesse Motlop for Carlton. Luminous Luke McDonald for Kangaroos. Footy heads, Errol Golden for the Swans. Alright, last packet of the case. Let's find out. Luminous, Marcus Windhager for Saints. And Adrenaline, Nick Dacos for Collingwood. Alright guys, that is it. That is all for this one. Hope you had a ball, and don't forget to go and grab your spots to be in the next one. Until then, I will catch you